Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to teach you about different types of fluid flow behavior and how engineers determine what kind of flow is occurring inside of a pipe. This experiment will focus on how flow transitions between smooth, stable motion and more chaotic, mixed motion as velocity increases. By changing the flow rate and observing the dye behavior, we can visually understand how fluid motion changes under different conditions. Here's a quick time-lapse of us building the experimental setup used to conduct the experiment. So our setup consists of a bucket supplying water through a clear vinyl tube. At the end of the pipe there's a ball valve that is used to control the flow rate, and halfway down the pipe there is a syringe inserted into the pipe where dye is injected into the stream so we can visualize the flow behavior. A beaker and stopwatch are used to measure the time required to collect a known volume of water. The Reynolds number is defined as Re equals rho Vd over mu, where rho is the density of the water, V is the velocity of the water, D is the pipe diameter, and mu is the viscosity. The Reynolds number represents the ratio of inertial forces to viscous forces in the fluid. At low Reynolds numbers, viscous forces dominate, producing smoother laminar flow. As velocity increases, inertial forces become more significant, which causes the flow to lose stability and transition into turbulence. Flow velocity is calculated by first determining the volumetric flow rate Q by dividing the measured volume by the measured time it takes to fill up that volume. Then you divide that value by the cross-sectional area of the tubing and you get the velocity. This first clip is a low Reynolds number. This flow is laminar and the dye remains smooth and stable, indicating minimal mixing between the fluid. In the second clip, the Reynolds number is increasing and the flow enters the transitional region. You can see here that the dye is becoming unstable and it's beginning to fluctuate and disperse later on down the pipe, indicating the onset of turbulence. And in this last clip, it is a high Reynolds number, the flow is turbulent, and the dye very quickly mixes and disperses throughout the fluid, indicating chaotic motion. All of our trials data was processed using an Excel sheet that I created, which calculates the flow rate, the velocity, and Reynolds number from the measured volume of 50 milliliters and time. The data is color-coded based on the flow type, so here you can see that the darker blue is laminar, the light blue is transitional, and the white is turbulent. You can see that most of the trials fell either into the laminar category or the turbulent category, and very few, only 2, were in the transitional flow range. This is because that transitional flow occurs over a very small window of Reynolds number, which is between 2100 and 4000, and when translated into our experiment, that corresponds to a range of approximately 1.2 to 2.2 seconds to fill 50 milliliters. This is a very small window, meaning that even with very small adjustments to the valve, it can quickly change the flow from laminar to turbulent conditions, which makes it difficult to consistently get transitional flow ranges. The Reynolds numbers for each flow that we calculated were used to compare the observed flow to the theoretical expected flow. Here you can see that anything under 2100 is laminar, anything over 4000 is turbulent, and anything in between will be transitional flow. The observed dye behavior was for the most part, consistent with these classifications, showing smoother flow at lower Reynolds numbers and increasing mixing at increasing Reynolds numbers. While the laminar and turbulent flows were clearly different and distinguishable, the transitional flows were more difficult to identify, as it can appear similar to turbulent flow, especially due to the difficulty injecting dye smoothly. It was more of a jerky, rapid insertion at some points, although you could still see the fluid behavior after the injection point. Some of the sources of error in this experiment include the uncertainty in measuring the 50 milliliter volume. It's impossible to be 100% accurate with this, so there was also some difficulty reading the water level in the beaker, and there will also be some errors and timing inaccuracies due to human error when using the stopwatch. Additionally, the velocity of the flow may have varied slightly during each trial due to changes in water level within the bucket, which affects the pressure driving the flow. The valve sensitivity and disturbances that may have been caused by dye injection also can contribute to variability in the observed results. At this point, you might ask, why does it matter what the fluid is doing inside of a pipe? The answer is that the flow behavior directly affects pressure loss, energy usage, mixing, and system performance. In many cases, these effects can be negative if not properly accounted for. For example, in pipelines that transport oil or natural gas, turbulent flow increases friction loss, which means more energy is required to move the fluid than theoretically expected, which leads to higher operating costs and reduced efficiency. In chemical plants, improper flow conditions can result in poor mixing, uneven reactions, which can produce reduced quality or unsafe working conditions. In power plants, inefficient steam flow can reduce energy output, and it can also damage equipment. And in water distribution systems, poorly controlled flow can lead to pressure loss and inefficient delivery of the water. Because of these effects, understanding flow behavior is important for designing systems that are efficient, safe, and reliable. The Reynolds number is very important, and it helps engineers predict behaviors and make better decisions when designing systems. Overall, this experiment demonstrates how fluid flow transitions between laminar, transitional, and turbulence, and it also highlights the importance of understanding flow behavior in engineering applications. I hope this video helped you understand flow behavior, and I hope you learned something, and I want to thank you for watching.